Everybody knows that part of the reason horror films are so creepy is because they usually take place in the dark. The dark's terrifying. However, horrors also have a number of daytime scenes, and people tend to forget about those. And that's what we're talking about today. We'll be diving into the short film Night Mommy, which I was a DP on, and breaking down some of my favorite daytime scenes. We'll be going over everything from lighting, camera setups, and even behind the scenes footage to show you exactly how it was all done. We'll also touch on the thought process behind some of the decisions made, and even mistakes we, and by we I mean I, made and learned from this film. Now, Night Mommy is a short directed by my good friend Jameson Brawley, who assembled an incredible team of cast and crew to make this happen. It truly would have been a disaster without everyone involved, so if any of you are watching this video, thank you. First and foremost, let's nerd out about the camera setup. The camera used was my trusty old Z-Cam E2 F6 with my typical cinema package. This includes the monitor, wireless transmission, just all the fixins for a long 6-day shoot. Now, the lens is where things get a little weird or interesting, depending on how you want to look at it. I knew I wanted to shoot this film on anamorphic because of its wide field of view. And this wider field of view is closer to how you and I see the world when you compare it to a spherical lens. And because of this, you're more easily submersed and drawn into what you're watching. And that was the goal and the reason behind shooting anamorphic. The anamorphic lens in question is actually a 1.7 times anamorphic adapter. And it was coupled with two different focal lengths, a 50mm and 85mm, depending on the shot. Now, if that was super confusing and it sounded like a different language, just know I used a 50 and an 85. We'll leave it at that. One last note on the lens is the intentionality behind the aperture. When used wide open, this lens is funky, like really, really funky. And the background turns into a blurry mess. I mean, it's cool in its own right, but to me, this wasn't the shoot for that much character, if you will, in the background. So with that, I had the lenses stopped down to no less than f3.5 in almost every case.
Oh, cool. Action!
The first daytime scene we have in this film is this sequence of 3 shots. We have a high angle 2 shot, which is followed by 2 over the shoulders. Because it's the most involved of the 3, let's start with this wide high angle shot. The director wanted both characters in frame and also wanted to see this light in the foreground flickering on and off. So to get the camera high enough, we really had no choice but to put it on a ladder. So we used 2 ratchet straps to attach a base and a ball head tripod mount to the top of the ladder. And even with the straps cranked down, there was a ton of weight up there, and I was honestly scared for my camera's life. But it ended up working out better than I thought, and it was also safer than I thought. So you'll see this done a couple more times in the behind the scenes footage later.
Yeah. Set down. Set. Action.
The lens attached was the 50mm, which may not sound wide at all, then it's not. But remember, this is anamorphic. So while the image height is that of a 50mm lens or a 50mm lens equivalent, the width is closer to a 29mm lens. That's pretty cool. Once camera was set and I was confident it wasn't going to smash into a million pieces or smash into someone, it was time to shape our light. The set we had for this shoot had some pretty wide rooms and some very tall ceilings, which was great, but it meant we needed quite a bit of light. So we really had to light spaces, not faces, for this entire shoot in order to make it feel more natural. Additionally, I wanted imperfect lighting, taking inspiration from the approach they used for the TV series The Last of Us. And if you haven't seen it, at least just look at it for the visuals. It's fantastic. The fixture in the foreground of our image simply had an aperture B7C in it, and it was set to about 4000 Kelvin with the flicker setting turned on. This scene needed to feel like early morning, so we had some bright horizontal light coming into the house from the windows behind camera. Starting on camera left, we had an aperture 300D with barn doors attached, which was placed outside, shooting through the dining room window. Next, to soften the light a bit, we put this lightweight fabric on the window. And honestly, I don't remember what kind of fabric this is, but I got a bunch of it at a fabric store, I think like Michael's. And in terms of how much light it cuts, it's similar to a quarter silk. You can't see what this light is doing in this particular shot, but you will in the next one, so we were just getting it prepped and ready. For our key light, the main light source hitting our talent, we used 4 Amaran 200Xs on this thing, which is called a double header. This allowed us to attach all 4 fixtures to a single light stand. The final light placed outside was this aperture 600D with a reflector, And like the others, this light was also going into this fabric store fabric, quarter silk. Moving on to the living room, which is our background, we had another 600 with a 2x Fresnel attached to the front and tucked it around this corner on camera right. Now this guy was shooting through a full layer diffusion, and it was pointed toward the corner of the ceiling just to fill the entire space. Now looking back, I would have changed two things from a lighting perspective with this shot. The first is the kitchen. we forgot to light the kitchen. Simply turning on the house lights, or at least the kitchen lights, would have been enough to fill this space and give it like a little more life. Even though the lights at the location were a wild mix of color temperatures from room to room, it probably would have been better than just this deep, dark, scary void in the background. It would have. The second adjustment would be to this door window thing, which is completely blown out, and the reason is super annoying. The blinds on the door window thing were pure white, whereas the window blinds were more of like a tan color. And this very small difference caused the sunlight to reflect off the white blinds and completely overexpose it. To fix it, the juice just wasn't worth the squeeze, honestly, and trying to stay on schedule, trying being the key word, took priority.
So how much longer do you think this is going to take?
Moving on to the shot of Jenna, played by Laurie Shaw, who is one of our three main characters. And she's having a conversation with the electrician in this back and forth over the shoulder. With the shot of Jenna, you can now see what the light shooting into the dining room is doing. You can see it spilling onto the far wall here, as well as the staircase. It's getting a nice little pattern too from the blinds. One more light was added to the scene for this one shot, and it can be seen hitting the floor in the hallway. This was an aperture 300x with a reflector attached, simply pointed down at the floor. Everything else for lighting remained the same as the high angle shot from before.
Scene 1A, take 1.
For our electrician, the only adjustment we had to make was relocate the 600 tucked behind the corner because it was now in frame. So all we had to do was tuck it into the opposite corner and point it shooting in the direction of our talent. You can tell it's pointed this way because of the shadow on the lamp in the background. And if you're ever trying to figure out how a scene was lit, pay attention to shadow directionality. It gives you a bunch of clues about where lights were placed within a space.
What, like 4 months?
Yeah. Well, I went in around 3.
Here we have a dialogue scene between Jenna and her husband, Braden, played by Isaiah Gordon, which is in their bedroom. The scene starts with just Braden, moves into a 2-shot, and finally goes into an over the shoulder. Unfortunately, there are several scenes that don't have any behind the scenes footage, at least of the exact setup, and this is one of those scenes. However, this whole short was lit with similar setups throughout, so we can still talk about it, and I can show some similar examples based on the other footage that we have. One thing we do have footage of, though, is the tent on the outside of the house, which was used for these 2 windows in our background. Because we were shooting a lot of day for night and didn't want to wait until 10 p.m. to begin shooting because it was in the summer, the best option was to block out all natural light from windows whenever possible. However, even for the daytime scenes, we kept the tent in place. Reason being, I didn't want to fight the sun. Bright, direct sunlight coming in through a window, unexpected cloud cover, which we had, and rain, which we also had, would not only interrupt or ruin a shot, it would completely trash our schedule, which we couldn't afford. So even though it took quite a bit of time to set up, the path of least resistance was to eliminate all those variables with a tent. Each one of these windows in the background was lit with an aperture 600, and they were pointed straight up and bouncing off the inside of our tent. To raise the ambience of the entire room, an Amaran 200X with a reflector was pointed into the ceiling on camera left. The second light was a 300X with a reflector, and it was shot into a DIY bounce cove thing. I have a giant tablecloth, of all things, that I use specifically for this reason, and this gave this nice, soft wrap of light around our talent like you see here. It also lifted the light within the space a little more to make it feel more like daytime. So while this setup is 10 times simpler than the last one, we still have some pretty good results, and that's why I'm including a couple simple setups in this breakdown to show you don't need 8 lights to make something look good. That brings us back into the bedroom for an early morning scene with Jenna and Braden. This scene is different from the previous bedroom setup because 1, it's on a different day, per the script, and 2, this scene was supposed to read as early morning, whereas the other was more of a late morning.
So the shot is here of the two characters sleeping, and so what's going to happen is while they're sleeping, they're going to just lay there still, and they're going to be in a sleeping mode. And years of acting lessons go into making something like that. It's hard of anything, right, Tyler?
Dead on.
This scene is a combination of 3 individual shots. The first is this medium wide 2-shot, followed by an over the shoulder, and then Jenna's point of view from the bed. Personally, I absolutely love the way this scene was lit, especially the first shot, so let's get into it. Like the previous bedroom scene, the lights outside of our window are the Aperture 600Xs bouncing into the underside of our tent. Other things that stayed the same were the lamps, both of which had the Aperture B7Cs, and our main fill light is again a 300X with a reflector attached, shooting into our DIY Cove bounce tablecloth thing. After the Cove was set, it was time to mix in our hard horizontal light. For this, we took 2 acrylic mirrors, tucked them into a corner on camera left, and both were pointed in 2 different directions. Then an Amaran 200X with a 2x Fresnel was shot into the mirrors and into the corner of the ceiling. Finally, a single net was placed in front of the mirrors, but just to one side. This is because the reflected light was a little too harsh on our talent, so we cut it back with the net while still keeping our harsh light on the bed covers and the sheets. And we still wanted a little hard light on them as well, which is why we just used a net instead of diffusion.
And then he says, still laying down, forgot to set my alarm. And that's when I want Jenna kind of popping up, maybe on my shoulder. You gonna be late? Yeah. And then, yeah, it's maybe a little higher. You gonna be late? Yeah. Yeah, it's fine. And then that's when you're gonna get up. Okay.
It's like this old man.
Yeah, it's fine. Action.
So harsh directional light was the goal. However, it was a little too directional. So to compensate for this, we boomed an Aperture T4C, which is the 4-foot tube, over top of our talent just to fill in the shadows. The last adjustment we made was made right before we started rolling, and that was to shoot an Aperture MC Pro into a bounce on camera right, and that was to bring up the exposure on Braden's face just a little bit. The over-the-shoulder looking at Jenna only required some very minor adjustments from the previous setup. First, the T4C had to be moved out of the way because it was in frame, so all we had to do was push it up against the wall on camera left. Second, Braden was in darkness in the bathroom, so we took an Amaran 200X and just bounced it into the ceiling behind camera, and that's the light that you see on his shoulder here.
Scene 14C, take 2.
Hey Braden, when she crosses the plane, give me just some motion with your hand, just like your left hand, like you're brushing your teeth or something, just so. And not right now, you're preparing, but when she gets up to leave to get the baby, then start brushing.
Just like face this way?
Yeah. And action.
Hey, did you get up with the baby last night?
No. Did you?
No. Did we just have our first full night of sleep?
Then for the reverse shot, Jenna's point of view on the bed, we just had to adjust the 200X in the bathroom. It was moved to the left side of the frame and just bounced off a wall.
And Cannon, let me get you to flip and be the lady.
Don't put your shoes in it.
Let me be a
What?
on the other
Is that
direction.
CTS on the bedside table? Is that a book or something?
Yeah.
It's a book or something.
So what do you think of the scene? Do you like the way it was lit as much as I do? Let me know in the comments below. I'm really curious to hear what you think.
Just move all the stuff in the library. It's basically that works out now. Table needs to push
But
it.
most lighting's already okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Now we're back in the foyer, except this time with Jenna and Braden on a different day, per the script. This scene is 2 different shots, both of which are over the shoulders, and for the most part they're lit the same. There's also a 3rd shot I'm going to include in these 2 because the lighting was once again the same, and it's a close-up of Jenna. This is the benefit of lighting spaces, not faces. You're able to move actors in and out of a space more quickly after you've established the way a scene's going to be lit and the look that you want. Just like before, all the lights on the exterior house remain the same, that being the 300D in the dining room, the 4 200Xs through the front door, and the 600D with reflectors shooting through the library/study room window. For Braden's medium shot, we took the T4C, boomed it high, and angled it toward him as his key light.
Action.
Hey, we should celebrate tonight, our first 100 scene. Let's all go out.
Oh, no. Did you forget that we banned him from restaurants? Did you forget about Applebee's?
Yeah, right. Okay, well, take him. I'll pick it up and don't cook.
Ooh, twist my arm.
Then one of the grips Hollywooded a bounce for his fill. And by the way, to Hollywood something means to have someone physically hold something opposed to getting a stand. Depending on the situation, it can be a little faster, and it's really good for just small minor tweaks here and there. To continue to lean into that feeling of early morning, we had an Amaran 100X behind Jenna on camera left.
And action.
This light simply had a reflector attached and was shooting onto the floor as a skip bounce. Skip bouncing is an easy and effective way to create a natural looking scene. And if you want to learn more about it, let me know and I can create a dedicated video on the subject because it's pretty interesting. When it came time for Jenna's medium shot, a 300 without any attachment whatsoever was placed in the hallway, which is the light you see here. And the 600C with the 2x Fresnel was still in the living room, just like the previous foyer scene. Even though this scene is lit virtually the same as the last scene in the foyer, it looks pretty different, at least different enough to feel like a different day, which was the goal. I do, however, wish we turned the intensity down on the 200Xs outside the door. They were a little too hot and it was causing some peaking. I also didn't have my camera's white balance set correctly, which is why the leaves outside are a teal/blue color. And believe it or not, this is way better than it looked before the color grade. It was pretty bad. Both of these issues are fixed in this close-up of Jenna looking out of the window. The intensity of the 200s was turned down at least enough to not cause a lot of peaking, but the leaves are green in the shot because it was more easy to fix it in post. It wasn't a white balance adjustment in camera like it should have been, but there you go.
She's gonna come in, right?
Yeah.
And then we hear, "Hey, stranger." She can do this with the baby. Yeah.
Let's call him a stranger.
And then when that's done, she turns and thinks, just walks out of frame.
So that's a callback line later, right?
Yeah.
When we're outside.
Hey, stranger. Yeah.
Hold that.
And now she's gone. You can walk away. But you're super suspicious.
That's good.
Scene 17, take 1.
If the lighting setups so far have been overwhelming, I have some great news for you because this exterior is crazy simple.
Action.
See you later, alligator.
Hey, you.
Oh, hey, Casey.
Gosh, you're out early. Oh, I'm just forcing myself to get out. But by the way, I still have your key. Oh, you know what? Just hang on.
This exterior is a sequence of 3 different shots. We have this wide, followed by a medium over the shoulder of Jenna, and then another over the shoulder of Casey, who's played by Emily Steele, and who is our 3rd and final main character for this film. All we had to do was put up a 6x frame with an artificial silk to diffuse the sun, and had one of our grips Hollywood bounce. That's literally it. Now, this frame and silk that we had, I was borrowing from a buddy, so I couldn't really be picky on what we got, but if I was to be picky, it would have been nice to have a 1/2 and 1/4 silk with this frame on top of a full silk. The one we had cut about 1.5 stops of light. Technically, it cut 1.6 stops, so And for the exteriors where we had light cloud cover like this one here, it was a little too much diffusion, but all things considered, it looked better with than without, so obviously we opted to use it.
Hey, you don't want to be late.
Now we're back inside, and this time we're in the living room with Braden on the couch. We then cut to Jenna slightly on the right-hand side of the frame, but the lighting setup didn't change for that shot.
Just probably, work on that honey-do list you made up for me.
This living room is pretty big, and it has some very, very tall ceilings, which means we needed several lights to eliminate all the little dark corners. Just based on all the windows, it may look like there's a lot of natural light that comes into this room, but in reality, it's pretty dark. Here's an image from our location scout so you can see exactly what I mean. To start, each window is gelled with CTS, color temperature straw, to continue that warm morning look. All this light coming in through the window behind Braden is our array of 4 Amaran 200Xs. It's the light you see hitting the back of the couch, and what's giving Braden his edge light. However, the light hitting him on the chest and hand is coming from a different fixture. This was an Aperture 300X with the projector mount once again, and it was shaped to only hit his body but not his face.
Alright, close your eyes, just sleeping in action.
Hey, you don't want to be late. Remember, I told you this is when my boyfriend comes.
What time is it?
It's almost 8 o'clock.
Just forget it out. I'll just call in sick.
Oh, that works. I was planning on going to my mom's this morning. Now you can come with me.
No, you know what? I actually feel a lot better.
It's a very small detail, but it truly makes the light feel like real sunlight coming in through the window. But we weren't finished there because there was another 300X bouncing into the ceiling on camera right, and to add a little more exposure on Braden's face, there was a bounce pointed down toward him. As small as this scene is, this is another setup I was very happy with at the end of the day. In this scene, we are once again back outside, and do you know what that means? Super simple lighting. Why? Because we had no other choice.
We shot the scene before and I just didn't like it because I came out and I had not decided how I want it blocked. So this week I just sat down with some pen and made some cartoons. This is exactly how I want it. So we'll see how it translates to the camera. Oh, hey Casey, just over to my mom's house. Oh, that is so sweet. And what's the next line after that?
She hasn't seen the baby in a week.
Yeah, we don't mind.
Yeah.
Do better. What are we on? No, better.
And I say, I'll see you later.
No, wait, you go to your front door. That is so sweet. You know, I'll see you later. And then we hear, how's your husband?
So this is.
What
So
did
it
you
should be
ask?
somewhere in line with that.
I may have
No,
you
that
cheat
was
just a
close.
little bit that way. Let's see
It's
more of your
before-
face.
No, it's
Oh,
right
I just
after
thought
lunch.
since his car was here that
Yeah.
doesn't feel well.
And
Oh,
already
he's
marked off
not
the
feeling
list.
well. Oh, poor guy. Tell him I said feel better. Will do.
This scene has basically 3 shots, but we'll talk about them individually because they're different enough. For the shot of Jenna, we again took the 6x frame and artificial silk to diffuse the sun.
Go there. Just lock it there. Yep. Actually, one second. I need to pop this in a little bit so I can get it. Okay, going up. Yep. Right there. Yep.
And fun fact, you can actually see it in the reflection of the windshield. Unfortunately, I didn't have a polarizing filter, so there was little we could do to fight reflections, both off the windshield and off the car in general. The only additional modification we did for this shot was we had a negative fill on camera right to get just a little more contrast on Jenna's face.
Casey. I'm just headed to mom's. She hasn't seen the baby in a while. See ya.
Oh, that's so sweet. Hey, where's your husband?
Sorry. What did you ask me?
In this next shot, old Casey here was lit the exact same way as Jenna in our previous shot, except this time the 6x frame was on camera right, and our Hollywood negative fill was on camera left. Easy peasy.
Or do you want to do it?
Just let's try it both ways. Yeah, just a step forward, like step back from that.
Yeah, one step back and then
And you kind of hop in place. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Take one more pump home. Almost.
Well,
Good morning.
but not marching band.
We then end the scene with this slow dolly in on Casey, which turned out to be a little more logistically annoying than I anticipated. Reason being, Jenna drives off in a car and exits frame left. That's all good and well, except the 6x frame was in the way, and we had to move it in order for the car to pull forward and drive off. We could have walked the 6x frame way back so it was out of the way, but that would require us to put it up really high. And the problem with that is the only stands we had available were C-stands, which were nowhere near tall enough. So we took the 6x, moved it out of the way, and instead took a small 2x3 flag of diffusion and boomed it over top of Casey to cut the amount of sunlight hitting her. Now, because it's a lot smaller, it didn't cut nearly enough light to match the previous shot of her, but that's all we could do with the time and resources we had.
Action. Wait. House. Cut.
Sticking with exteriors, our next scene is another sequence of 3 shots, starting from inside of a van of the electrician, cutting to a wide, and then finishing with an over the shoulder. Side note, this is my buddy Keenan Daniels. He is absolutely hilarious. Go and follow him on social media. You won't be disappointed.
The $1 Million Man, we are out. We just wrapped up. I am spoiled now. I've been bitten by the movie bug, okay?
The shot from inside the van, as well as the wide shot walking to the house, are lit all natural, or as a key grip I used to work with would say, oysters. Get it? Because they're raw. It's funny. It's funny. When we move to our over the shoulder, we walk in our trusty 6x frame, and this time it was placed on camera left, just mirroring where the sun is. We also had to Hollywood a bounce on camera right, and this was to bounce more sunlight into the electrician's face because the shadow from his hat was causing him to be just a little underexposed. That brings us to another simple exterior setup. However, we had to be a little more creative on how to diffuse the sun with this one. Reason being, we start out wide, and then the camera dollies in on Casey for a close-up. So as the camera moves in, we decided to Hollywood a small pop-up diffusion, as well as a negative fill, and walk them in at the same time as camera. When it comes to the story, this is when the audience sees Casey's crazy side for the first time. So it's a bit of a transformation shot. So as we get closer to Casey, you see more contrast slowly being added to her face on camera right as that negative fill moves closer. And that's to add to that transformative moment. We're back to another interior in the living room, and this is another we unfortunately don't have BTS footage of. However, I feel it was lit very well, so I decided to keep it in this breakdown and show you exactly how we did it. Our kitchen back here is being filled with that array of 4 Amaran lights, and they're just shooting through the windows at the back of the kitchen. Like our previous kitchen shot, all the windows are gelled with quarter CTS. Our key light hitting Braden here was a 300D, which had a 2x Fresnel lens attached, and it was just shooting into a bounce and back onto him. If you look closely, you can see the catch light it gave us in this close-up here. This pattern on the wall in our medium wide is the 300D with the barn doors that's coming in through the dining room window from earlier. We also had a light hiding up in the staircase, which was a 300X, and again, it had the projector mount. For this, I wanted just a sliver of light coming down from the staircase, and I wanted it to hit the wall and the rail, as well as Braden's arm and shoulder, but again, not his face. Personally, I'm very happy with the results of this shot as well, and let me know what you think. And that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed this breakdown. I know it was a long one, but if you made it this far, thank you. Also, do you enjoy detailed breakdowns like this, or would you prefer them to be shorter and a little more simplified? I ask because I want to make sure I'm putting out videos that are helpful for my core people, and if you made it this far in the video, that's you. So definitely let me know down in the comments. As always, thank you so much for spending just a little bit of time with me today, and I'll see you again very soon.
Well, with an AeroPress, you use these little filters here.
Can you use it more than once?
You can, if you want to slum it.